Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the second installment of our summer NSF-GRFP application prep series. I'm Dr. Matthew Plooster with the Graduate School Office of Fellowships and Benefits, and I serve as the coordinating official for the NSF-GRFP as well as the Graduate Student Fellowship Advisor for this campus. So for many things relating to GRFP, I'm your contact, your go-to person. Today, we're going to talk about personal statements, which is one of the primary components of your application. Today, we will cover a few things. First, we'll just go over some brief eligibility. Most of you were with us last week for our overview or at a previous info session, but I know we have some new faces with us today. So we'll briefly go over what the NSF-GRFP is and eligibility, but for more in-depth, you can take a look at last week's presentation or reach out to me individually. Then we'll dive into personal statements, how to get started, statement introduction, a hook to dive in with, what is the intellectual merits, what is the broader impact, writing about your own particular experience, that which is unique to you individually, suggested page structure, some writing tips, various common weaknesses, drafting your statement and proofreading and seeking feedback, and a couple FAQs and some resources that may be helpful for you. So what is the NSF-GRFP? Well, this is a United States federal government funded fellowship program. So this is unlike most of the NSF funding, which is where a grant is written and it is approved and funded by the NSF to fund a lab, fund a specific research objective. The NSF-GRFP, the Graduate Research Fellowship Program, is funding for you, the student, who will conduct some research, who is pursuing a graduate degree, but it is an individual funding program. And with that, that means that if you pursue your graduate education here at the University of Utah, you can use that here. If you're pursuing your graduate education at another institution in the United States in a qualified program, you can take that with you. So it is mobile and it is your funding. So this is one of the oldest student funding programs in the United States funded by the federal government. And it is to ensure the vitality of human resources of science and engineering in the United States, and to reinforce the diversity within STEM, both the research, the education, and practice as well for those who don't go into specifically teaching and research, but go into the professional practice of science. The GRFP does have a long history of being connected with leadership and with excellence. So probably about, I believe the number is 42, 43 Nobel laureates were previously GRFPs, probably 20, 30 years prior, a number of university presidents and college deans, as well as other industry and education and government leaders, such as they list here, Secretary of Education, the Google founder, among other leading names in STEM. So that's what the GRFP is. It does provide you with some very key benefits. It's a 5-year fellowship that has 3 years of funding. And for each of those 3 years, you receive a monthly stipend totaling $37,000 a year. So that's over 12 months, not just fall, spring, but summer is included in that as well. And for those 3 years, you also receive tuition remission. Wherever you go, they have to cover your tuition. The NSF does provide career life balance. So if you need medical leave, if you have children and you need parental leave during your GRFP when you're funded, that is part of being a GRFP, that access to career life balance. Also access to other professional development opportunities, namely the NSF intern program, where you can get up to 6 to 12 months additional funding to go and continue your research, do an internship, etc. And then various universities and even PIs add additional benefits on top of what the NSF provides. Here at the University of Utah, we cover your health insurance for those 3 years. And we also provide you $2,000 a year for research and professional development expenses for each of those 3 years. Some PIs will add a bonus on top of that. So what the NSF provides is oftentimes a base, depending on where you attend graduate school. Other important benefits, as mentioned, this is mobile. You can take this elsewhere. It follows you where you go as long as you're in the United States at in a qualified STEM graduate program. Occasionally, this does give you a step up in graduate admissions. I know we have some undergrads here, some rising seniors who are looking at grad school, have not yet applied yet. This can be a help in that admissions process as well. And in many cases, it takes you from a waiting list into admission, or even in some cases with really competitive programs where there just was not enough seats. This can get you from being rejected to accepted. This does provide prestige and recognition. This is a program that receives probably about 20,000 applications a year, and there's about 2,000-ish awards offered, fellowships offered every year. And it does carry the NSF name, which does provide a bit of cachet and prestige to your resume, to your CV, to you as a researcher and a scholar. And this does establish a pattern of seeking and hopefully getting external funding, specifically to those of you who are looking at careers in academia as researchers, as professors. There will be an expectation when you are on faculty to go and seek external funding. So this gets that ball rolling, it establishes that history, and provides you with that additional experience and skill when you are on the job market. To be eligible, you must be a United States citizen, national, or permanent resident. Every application cycle, I get numerous questions of, well, I'm international technically, and here's my unique situation. Unfortunately, we as the University of Utah, we have no flexibility with this. We can't make exceptions. This is a federally funded program, and we have to follow those rules. And additionally, you must be enrolled or intend to enroll in a research-based master's or doctorate in an eligible STEM field. And our previous presentation, as well as the solicitation, goes into great detail of the various sub areas of each of these disciplines, but you must fall under the umbrella of chemistry, computer and information science and engineering at large, geoscience, life sciences, materials research, mathematical sciences, physics and astronomy, psychology, social science, and STEM education. Really quickly on the STEM education, this is for those who are studying the education of STEM rather than those getting, let's say, a master's to go and be a biology teacher in a high school. So there's that nuanced difference there. But as mentioned, check out the solicitation or take a look at last week's presentation where we go into a little bit more depth of what each of those fields might look like. And for most of you, that's going to match up. I am getting a PhD in chemistry, therefore my research identifies with the chemistry discipline here. Whereas sometimes, and this is 100% acceptable, okay, and normal, you might be a chemistry major, your PhD is in chemistry, but your specific research, your finite nuanced niche research is going to identify more with bio life science on a different disciplinary panel. And that's okay, and that's normal. But if you do have questions about that, feel free to reach out to me or chat with your faculty mentor. So who isn't supported? Well, joint science and professional degrees such as PhD, JD, MD, PhD, MBA, PhD. I get a lot of questions about MBA. Business administration or management degrees are not allowed. The NSF does expect that you focus on your master's or your PhD in a research STEM area and not be distracted with other areas of study such as social work or counseling or business administration or law or what have you. So counseling and social work are also not qualified, as well as history, unless you are studying the history of STEM in one way or another. And then education at large is not eligible except for STEM education. Research within disease-related goals, unless you are biomedical engineering, that's the one nuance here. And this doesn't mean that the outcomes of your research might not have implications with disease-related goals, but generally speaking, the direct results are not necessarily studying disease-related goals or such. So there's that little bit of nuance there. Clinical research is also not supported by the NSF-GRFP, patient-oriented research, epidemiological and medical behavioral studies, outcomes research, health services research, as well as pharmacological, non-pharmacological, and behavioral intervention and similar studies. Okay, so there are three primary areas of your application, and your application will be facilitated through an online portal at research.gov. Formerly, it was on Fastlane. It is now transitioned to research.gov. You're going to have your transcripts. You have two statements, a personal statement and a graduate research plan, and letters of reference. And when you build your application in the portal, there's going to be all sorts of other questions and information that you provide, but these are the three primary areas here. And today we're going to talk about personal statements. Next week, we'll talk about graduate research plans. So let's dive in now to personal statements. It's officially called the Personal Relevant Background and Future Goals Statement. So a lot is packed into this 3 pages. It's a maximum of 3 pages, single-spaced, 12-point font, no smaller than 12-point font, 1-inch margins, etc. Must address broader impacts and intellectual merit, and we'll go over what that is precisely, and each with their own specific header. So that is a formatting concern there. And your opportunity, this is your opportunity as the applicant, as a scholar, as a student, to talk about who you are, how you've prepared for graduate school, and as a researcher, and your professional and leadership goals post-graduation, post-doctorate. So getting started, some of you may have received my email that did have a little worksheet on there with some guiding questions over 3 primary areas of what you want to cover in a personal statement, the where I've been, where I am now, and where I'm going. And there were some guiding questions there. And hopefully you filled in some bullet points with that of these are the relevant things I want to cover. That's a great start. You want to reflect on various questions as you brainstorm what you feel is important to include in your story. Your personal statement is your story, not your research's story. You're going to talk about your proposed research later on in a different document. So among the questions you want to ask yourself, what is unique, distinctive, or impressive about my story? What is it that makes me a unique candidate, that sets me aside from others? How did you become interested in your field? What interested you in science as opposed to poetry or history or healthcare side of science, which is outside of GRFP, or humanities or the fine arts and whatnot? Many of you are going to have strong talents and maybe have undergrads or dual major in some of these areas, but what interests you in science, and specifically your specific area of study? What's that, so to say, siren call that's bringing you over to graduate school to research something very, very specific? What have you learned about this field, whether it's biology or chemistry or engineering, and more finite, your sub area there? What have you learned about this field through your classes, through your readings, through seminars, and other work or professional development or community experiences? How have you capitalized on opportunities that have been available for you? Or maybe you grew up in a locale, in a state or a city that didn't have a lot of STEM opportunities for you as you were growing up, or you went to an undergrad that just did not have a strong area with us. If you didn't have those opportunities readily available for you, how did you create them? How did you go about seeking them, and what were you able to accomplish? And what reasons can you give for reviewers to be interested in you? You have to have that hook. What sets you aside from others? So start your personal statement talking about you. It's important that you remember, I'm going to say this a few times, that the NSF-GRFP fund is for you as an individual, for your scholarly research, and for your leadership potential, not for your PI's lab, not for your institution, not for your PI's research lab, not for your department. It is you and your research. So you want to hone in on those bits there. So with that, consider the following questions. Why are you pursuing a graduate degree? And some of you are coming back after some time between your bachelor's degree. You have some work experience and other life experience, and now you're choosing to come back. So why not just graduate degree, but why now? Why are you studying science, and why this particular finite area of research? Why do you have your specific research question and research interest that you have? What's informed that? Why are you most passionate about within science? So what's that fire that you have? You might be interested in biology or chemistry, but what's the real exciting dimension for you? What is it that really excites you? Share an outstanding research experience and discuss the challenges that you've overcome. This is a really important thing here. The NSF does not want to necessarily read, my life has been very easy and happy. I've had all the opportunities in the world and I've landed here where I am today. That may describe you, and that's good. But if you've encountered challenges, that's going to show something that the NSF does want to see. You've faced a challenge and you've proven your resilience by overcoming that. So what challenges have you had? How have you overcome that? What did you learn from that experience? That could be, depending on what that is, a very compelling part of your story. As you open, you want to have a good hook. And that could be a story of how you became interested in science, a unique research experience that you've had, or maybe, and with that, for example, you might have been working in a lab as an undergrad and you had this epiphany, the light bulb went off, and there was a point where you understood, this is what I want to do. This isn't just something to do while I'm an undergrad, maybe earn a few dollars while going to school and get some experience to supplement my bachelor's degree, but I really want to dive in and do this long term. What was that moment for you? Why you're choosing to pursue a graduate degree and the research you specifically your specific project? So is there a specific story that could be a good hook? A unique leadership or outreach experience relating to STEM? What in STEM you're passionate about and why? Your broader impact in the community? What have you done already within your community? And your personal background that led you down this unique path. Is there a specific experience that you've had that led you to graduate school? Or in some cases, you might be a first generation student that making it into college as an undergrad period was quite an accomplishment. What led you down that path? Now we're going to chat about intellectual merit and broader impact. Intellectual merit is just that. It is the studious side of things, whereas broader impacts, it's your impact at a broader level. How are you impacting the community around you? And that community can be defined in a very interesting ways. That doesn't necessarily mean this University of Utah community or the greater Salt Lake City community. It could be in a professional community, in a workplace. There's some flexibility with how you define that. So let's dive in first with intellectual merit on your personal statement. So we're going to pay attention just to this, the column on the left. Your merit is where you describe your motivation, your ability, your research experience, how you've prepared as a student, as a scholar, as a researcher, your achievements, your perseverance, and your goals. What are your goals for the next 20 to 30 years? Your scholarly goals, your professional goals, your goals as a leader. Broader impacts relating to your personal statement is where you'll describe your background, your story, and how you've been part of a larger community, how you've broadened participation in science, you've engaged in outreach, you've done volunteer work, you've taken initiative, and you've been a leader. This does not necessarily have to be science related. If you have science broader impacts that you can talk about, that's great, that's fantastic. Please include that. But let's say that you have really strong broader impacts through you've been a leader in your church community. You've been civically active in certain ways. You volunteer regularly with a local nonprofit that you're passionate about, and you've really made an impact there. Those are things to talk about in your broader impact area. Intellectual merits, as mentioned, this is your history as a student and a scholar. What what is of note here? Your documented intellectual ability, your GPA, your awards that you may have been recognized with. This is where you also show your evidence of your ability to plan and conduct research, to work independently, to communicate research, and to take initiative to solve problems, to persist, to overcome challenges. Broader impact. I should note here, intellectual merit is generally an area where students do very well in describing their intellectual merit. As students, especially in grad school, we're taught to really focus on this area. What is the intellectual merit? What is the scholarly significance or the research significance of what we are doing? We're really well trained with that, but it's broader impacts where students do tend to have a little bit more, need a little extra support in writing their statements. And so our fourth and final installment in this summer series will be specifically on broader impacts. So this is where you describe your impact on society personally and through your research and through your various communities that you identify with. And this is your opportunity to say how you identify and what communities you might identify with. So describe how you have participated with and impacted a diverse population, whatever that diversity might be. That might be in a church community, that might be in various student organizations, that might be in LGBTQIA initiatives in the community, various things that whatever diversity you might be included with, but not just diversity, but also your outreach, your teaching, your mentoring, how you've impacted STEM education. You may have been a tutor at some point in your life. You may have worked with policymaking as it relates to our environment and such, just as some examples there. Community outreach, how you participated in and been a leader of science clubs, writing, blogging, podcasts, and other media. How have you been communicating science? The impact in creating and cultivating a diverse workplace. Have you been in a work setting where you have been a pseudo leader, as Simon Sinek, the leadership guru out there, would say, not all leaders are managers and not all managers are leaders. So how have you taken that leadership role in a workplace, even if you've not been in that sort of official management role? And how have you increased collaboration between academic and industry sectors? Do you have any experience with that, where you've bridged that gap between industry and academia, industry and research? Or even on the research side, do you have experience in broadening between disciplines? How have you reached out as an engineer to, let's say, chemistry, mechanical engineering to chemistry? That might be a bit of a stretch. My science degree is social science and education leadership, so bear with me with my examples. So hopefully this gives you a good idea of broader impacts can be a lot of things, and they're going to be unique to you, your story, your experience. So writing about that experience, that unique experience that is yours. Who was your research advisor, your faculty mentor and PI, and why? Specifically, those of you who are in graduate school right now, why did you choose your program? Oftentimes, there's a faculty member, you want to work in their lab. They are specialists in an area that you're interested in studying in. Why? Talk about who that individual is, what you're hoping to learn from them, and why you chose them, that lab, that institution. How did you get involved with the various projects that you've been involved with? What was your role? Were you independent or were you part of a team? And this is where you own your experience. We are very well trained to say we. We worked in this lab and we worked towards these larger goals. That's great. Talk about the larger goals that you were working towards as part of a team. But what was your individual contribution? Yes, a research lab or a research project is a machine, but there are various cogs that are all very important to the function of that machine. What was the cog you were responsible for? Own it, talk about it, use I statements. What sort of skills and knowledge were gained from your various research experiences? What were the results? Did you have publications or presentations? Did you receive any sort of recognition? Did you learn anything from that process? Maybe you didn't come up with the results you were looking for, and you had to go back and change some of the mechanics in your methodology or in the execution of your data collection, what have you. Were there lessons learned along the way? That also shows a great deal of maturity in your research, is being able to say, we experimented. We learned, we didn't get the results we wanted, and we learned from this, and we had to go back and reevaluate some of the cogs in the machine, so to say. And we have gone back, and then we have moved forward with a revised research plan. That's going to be a very mature thing to bring up. Consider including various elements in your narrative, such as your where you've been, your present, as mentioned before, this kind of review of what I've mentioned already. Where are you today? So your present is not just, I'm going to be a senior in my baccalaureate degree program in chemical engineering. It's going to be, your present is grad school is going to be a part of that present. I want to do XYZ to prepare for grad school, to prepare as a leader in graduate education, and then finish that degree. So think of college at large all the way to the end of your doctorate as your present, even if you're still an undergrad, or maybe this fall you're going into your first year as a graduate student. And then your future. This isn't because we're including in your present your future graduate education and completion of that grad education. Your future is very long-term. It is, what is the next 30 years? What goals do you have? And one thing that I get regularly is, well, what if I talk about XYZ goal for the next 30 years, such as I plan to go and work at a top public institution in a research capacity and teach some classes, be an all-star academic researcher. But then what if I go and decide to work for industry instead? Will I have to pay back my GRFP? Will I be in trouble with the NSF? I can assure you there are no NSF police that are going to come and say, hey, you said this in your statement, in your application, and 7 years later, you're working in private industry rather than in a university research lab. That will not happen. You just want to speak in good faith for, at the time of application, these are my goals. The NSF absolutely does, as does pretty much every funding agency out there. So not just NSF fellowships, but all fellowships out there. There's this understanding that lives change, interests change, research takes you into new directions that might lead you into a different area of emphasis with your research, or even into non-research positions. That is okay. Just be honest for where you are right now. And don't sweat, what if my course changes? Will I be in trouble? There are a few things where you might need to communicate to us and we need to reevaluate, such as if you're leaving your biology PhD to study family and marriage counseling, that's going to be a conversation that we have to have, and how that will impact you as an NSF fellow, and that would lead to you losing your fellowship. But as far as what you do after you graduate, your plans might change. That's really quite normal. So don't let that weigh down on your shoulders if that is something that is weighing down on you as you talk about your future goals. As you structure your 3 pages, 3 pages is not a lot of space. Even though it is single spaced, it is still very little space. So you have to make the best use of the real estate as you can. This is a common recommendation for structuring your personal statement. That said, your statement is going to be unique to you, your story, how you want to frame your story and your ideas. So this might not be what works for you, and that's okay. But this is just an idea for you if you need a starting point. Start with a story of why you're in graduate school, or what led you here, what you hope to achieve, or what really interests you in research, or the impact that you want to have. What's your hook? So use that first third of your first page for your hook. Draw your reader in. Then what's your relevant background? This can be pretty pretty lengthy or can be pretty pithy, such as I have a bachelor's degree in this, I have XYZ experience as a researcher, and I'm starting this fall in such and such program where I hope to achieve XYZ. It could be as short as that or more elaborate. And then on the bottom third of your first page, you dive into your intellectual merits. And you do have to have a specific heading for intellectual merits and broader impact. That is relatively new in the past couple of years, that you have to have that specific header. No header, no review. And if any of you are applying and you do not get the NSF-GRFP, I want it to be because the pool was just so competitive and it was such a hard decision for reviewers to make, where they draw that line of who does get the award and who does not get the award. I do not want it to be because your application was not even reviewed over formatting technicalities. Let's make sure we work together to make sure that you are formatted correctly. You have all the headers you need, you're respecting the margins and the spacing and such, so that you get every ounce of consideration that you can for your application. So intellectual merits and broader impacts, sometimes students will combine those into one section, intellectual merit and broader impact in one section. Other times, like we have illustrated here, that might be two separate things. Again, what works for you? But intellectual merit, what is your scholarly background? How have you trained? What is your research experience? And then halfway through your, so you've got about one full page, half page here, half page there. Then you go into your broader impacts. So your personal, your outreach, your international experience, especially if it relates to science, teaching, mentoring, leadership. And this is about another page equivalent, half page here, half page there. And then your preparedness to plan and conduct research. So what are those more project management skills that you've acquired? What is that project management experience that you have where you can say, I'm ready for this new opportunity? And then you can go into your future goals. What do you hope to achieve in this program? And then what's the next step for that? Where do you hope to go from finishing your PhD? Talk about that here. Some writing tips for you. Very importantly, write clearly. There's definitely a cliche out there that, and I think some pop culture definitely does not help with these myths out there, these perceptions that STEM individuals can't write. And that's not true. Some of the best application essay writing that I've read have been from people in all disciplines. There's no, history students are better writers than chemistry students. But you do want to make sure that you do write clearly. Be pithy, be succinct, only include what is necessary. You want to make sure that each sentence is purposeful. Three pages is not a lot. If you feel like it is a lot, once you start writing, you're going to be feeling that limitation pretty heavily. Omit unnecessary language, especially technical jargon. Utilize technical vocabulary, that specific research jargon, as absolutely necessary, but if it's not necessary, do not use it. Keep in mind, let's say that whatever your finite area of research, your specific research question or questions that you will be centering your project around, that you will propose in your other statement, you will not have a reviewer reviewing that is a specialist in that area. Chances are your reviewers will not be from your broader discipline. You might be a chemistry student who's reviewed by a physicist and a biologist. So you will be reviewed by scientists, you will be reviewed by researchers, but do not go in saying anyone who is studying quantum physics, they know what XYZ is, because your reviewers will not be quantum physicists. So keep that in mind when you look at the technical language that you use. So use shorter words over longer and more common vocabulary over complicated vocabulary where you are able. Know your audience, super important with everything. Know your audience. Keep in mind who your reviewers will be. So who are your reviewers? That's a question that you're probably asking right now to the screen. Matthew, who are my reviewers? Well, they're going to be faculty. And sometimes some industry scientists as well. but for the most part, it is faculty researchers at universities just like the University of Utah. They will not have a conflict of interest with you. So if they've written a letter of recommendation for you, they will not have any proximity to your application. There will be some elements of anonymity there where able, but they are faculty. Let's also consider this to a new level here. So put yourself in the mindset of your faculty member. Oftentimes when reviews happen, you have a faculty member who they go to work in the morning, they teach some classes, some undergrad lecture classes, then they have some faculty committee meetings, then they lead a graduate seminar, then they work on an article that they are preparing for peer review for, and then they have kids' soccer games and swimming lessons, then they get home and they have piles of laundry to do and domestic tasks that we all have to face. And then at 11 o'clock at night, they're about to lay down and call it a day when they realize I have 10 applications I have to review by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. That's who's reviewing. So you want to make sure that your writing is clear and it's not going to be a burden. You want it to be as smooth of an experience for them as possible. Now let's talk about GRFP timeline. The reviews will be happening over winter break. So I've had several reviewers say to me that the experience is you're off celebrating the holidays with your family and they want to go sledding and go build a snowman. And you have to say, I've got to lock myself up in my office for a couple hours to read this. So you have fun. I'll join in the fun when I can. That's kind of the mindset that a lot of reviewers are going to be here. So make it easy. Know what they're looking for. A lot of that will be in the solicitation. If you've not looked at the solicitation, I encourage you to do so. And write in a way that makes it easy for them to get the info that they need to make a good decision. So that's why you want to make sure you have a nice thematic flow. Chronology is usually the best. Don't be flipping back and forth from the past to the present, the past to the future. Make it easy. Don't make them have to say, oh, what was that? Let's go back a few pages. They're introducing something new here, and I'm really confused how that fits in. You want this to be the easiest, least confusing read that they have. And be confident in yourself. Really, your confidence does shine through in your writing, and we notice it when we review applications. The NSF is funding you, not your PI, not your institution, not the lab that you're doing your research assistantship in. Take ownership of your scholarly and research path and career goals. Don't understate your accomplishments. Have confidence in your confidence in your accomplishments. Don't take this time to be humble and modest. Give yourself the credit where credit is due. Highlight your role in projects, research, and leadership roles, even if those are situations where, well, it was really a group effort here. That's great. Acknowledge that it was a group effort. What was your role with the group? Talk about that. Write with I statements as opposed to we, though you will not escape we. You will talk about in your research statement how we, under the direction of my faculty mentor, we will be addressing this. But here is what I will be doing with my project. So you have to balance out the I's with the we's, but make sure you hit the I's. And tell your compelling story. Your story is not going to be anyone else's story. Make sure it's yours. Don't model your narrative off of someone else's, because their experience and their trajectory moving forward and their research ideas and their leadership potential and experience is going to be unique and different from yours. I think it was Mark Twain or Teddy Roosevelt who said comparison is the death of joy. So don't compare yourself to others and their experience, rather hone in on your strengths and acknowledge your weaknesses. Now, some important considerations here. The NSF does have various outreach goals and diversity goals that they want to support to ensure that they do have a broad and diverse and highly talented STEM workforce here in the country. So if you have attended a minority serving institution, an MSI, or you plan to for graduate school, talk about that. If you studied or grew up in an EPSCoR jurisdiction, which is where science is not as competitive as it might be, and so the NSF is really trying to boost helping people from those areas. Idaho is an EPSCoR territory. I'm from Idaho, and so if I were applying for this, I would talk about what it was like growing up in Idaho and doing my undergrad in Idaho, where STEM was not as big of a focus as it is here at the University of Utah, and where I had to go looking for opportunities that were not available to me that are readily available for students here on this campus. That's just an example there. And non-traditional education tracks. You might be a non-traditional student, not the usual 24-year-old grad student. You might be 45 years old. We're seeing that more and more, and we encourage and celebrate those students who choose to pursue the NSF-GRFP at their unique point in their educational journey. But talk about that. Specific to non-traditional students, like I said, if you're eligible, apply. But in your narrative, you are going to really want to address the why questions. And really, it's going to make your narrative very compelling and very unique to you. So why are you going back to school now? You spent 5, 10, 15 years in industry. Why are you pursuing education again? Why are you going to get that PhD now? What's the story there? And why in this particular area? If you have a chemistry undergrad and you worked in a corporate lab for 10 years, you could still go in a lot of different directions in grad school. So why your specific finite path of research? Why is that the path you want to go down? And what was your motivation to take these various steps here? Why now? Why are you going back to school? We're seeing a lot more career pivots now than we have in the past. And that might describe you. So why are you pivoting? That is a compelling part of your story to tell. Some common weaknesses with applications. Unorganized personal statements that don't tell a clear story. This is why you want to make sure you have a good page structure for your personal statement and also your research statement. This is more on your research statement, but this can be relevant on your personal statement as well, where your research is unclear, it is incomplete, it is unpolished, how you talk about your ideas about your research. There's too much or too little detail. You want that nice Goldilocks, just right spot there. Your failure to own your research or your research experience. We talked about this a few times already today. Own your contributions. You might not be the headliner in the lab that you've worked in, but you played a role. What was that role? Take credit where credit is due. And lacking recognition of research risks. We're going to hit this pretty hard next week, but this is essentially saying, when I propose my research, I need to acknowledge where the risks are. Is it in the data collection? If that this risk does come to fruition, what's my plan B? That shows a lot of maturity in your research as a student, a scholar, a researcher, and the reviewers love to see that you are thinking about potential contingencies that you need to plan for. Dense writing that is difficult to understand or uninteresting. You do need to make this interesting. Too much jargon and failure to address your broader impacts. Like I said, intellectual merit is usually an area the students do okay with, but it's broader impacts between the two where they have a little bit more of a challenge. When you draft your statement, start with an outline. This will help you map out your thoughts and into a cohesive and comprehensive structure. Where do you want to talk about this? Where do you want to talk about this? How does this all flow together? Having an outline before you start writing will be very helpful for you. Plan to go through multiple drafts of your personal statement and really your research statement as well. You will want to proofread and edit before you take it to others, and then you do want to have others reviewing, and a variety of people as well. Utilize your writing resources. Here at the University of Utah, we have a writing center where you can go meet with a writing consultant. They can really help, especially in the early parts of your project here, where you're wanting to just outline your statement, how to get started. They are fantastic people to meet with, to work on that. Really important caution here, word processing softwares, Word, Google Docs, etc., they have spelling and grammar checks, but they aren't always accurate. So when you are proofreading, check and make sure your grammar is good, it is appropriate, it is correct for what you are trying to say. Oxford comma, I'm on team Oxford comma, but if you are utilizing sentence structure where you may or may not need that comma, you pay attention to those little things there as well, because it can change the meaning of what you're trying to express, your ideas, your goals. And then also spelling. Some things to consider there. When you are proofreading and seeking feedback, you want to have multiple partners. So these are individuals that you can go to and say, here's my draft. Would you please read this? Please give me some feedback on how I can make this stronger. So this is going to be your faculty mentor, but you don't want to give them the most preliminary draft. You want to maybe go through a few rounds of edits before you take it to your faculty mentor. Others are classmates, friends, roommates, parents, siblings. You want people with a variety of backgrounds to read this, not just if you're a chemistry student, not just other chemists or chemistry faculty or chemistry students. You want a broader community looking at your documents. Spelling and grammar feedback is important and valuable. So if that is provided for you, take that and consider it. But you want your feedback on your writing and narrative to be the focal point. Not necessarily the mechanics of you missed a period here, you really should have a comma here. Those are important things, but how are you conveying your ideas? How are you describing your experience? Is that coming across clear and concise, or do your sentences and paragraphs need some restructure? Ask your proofreaders to provide you feedback on the flow. Is it going from start to finish nicely and easily, or is it pretty jagged? How are your ideas articulated? Are you being clear? It might be clear to you, it might be clear to your classmate in your same program, it might not be clear at large. And if they walk away with a decent understanding of what you're writing, so this is a really good sign of a really well-written paper. If I'm able, like I said, my area of research is education policy and education leadership. If I'm able to take your science paper, your application here, and I can get to the end and say, okay, I might not understand your methodology. I might not understand the specifics of data collection or the importance of these various data variables that you are researching with, but I have a pretty good idea of what you're trying to accomplish here, or what the impact that you're trying to have. That is a very good sign if someone who's not in your finite area, someone who's not a scientist, they can walk away with I've got a good idea of what Joe or Jane is trying to accomplish here. That's good. But plan to go through several rounds of proofreading and editing. The NSF-GRFP application deadline is in the middle of October. It is the end of May right now. You've got a lot of time. We encourage you, please use a lot of time, because you don't want to be doing your edits under the duress of a deadline. We want to give you as much time as you can to go through these various rounds of edits without unnecessary stress. So do plan to go through multiple rounds of proofreading and edits. Okay, a couple FAQs for you. These might be questions that you have, they might not. And if you still do have questions, as mentioned, when we get to the end, we'll turn off the recording and this will be your time for your questions and concerns. So question, the personal statement limit is 3 pages. Does this include sources, or can I have another page for bibliography or for an appendix or for images? The 3-page limit is the maximum. That is your total with everything. You cannot exceed 3 pages. So if you need to have sources cited in a bibliography, if you need to have images, if you need any additional information in there, that has to be in that 3 pages. So the 3 pages is your total personal statement real estate. Use it wisely. Can I use an image? Absolutely. Images are allowed, and in some cases are highly encouraged for you to utilize. An example here is if you are using equations in your statements, the NSF specifically does recommend if you're using equations, put that in an image rather than typing out, and because the font can get really wonky, especially as you upload your PDF statement into the portal. There could be some distortion there. So an image oftentimes is much better for an equation. That said, here's the important caution here. Images are allowed, but they take up space. They take up valuable space. So you need to weigh, is this image necessary, or is it going to be better for me to use that extra space to write? It's all about balance. How many drafts of my personal statement should I go through? Well, this depends on a lot of things here, but many successful applicants will go through many rounds of edits, such as 10 to 20 rounds of proofreading and editing. This doesn't mean that 10 times you need to hand your paper to 10 people every single time, but you're going through a process of proofreading and editing multiple times. But here's some advice. Those of you who are in grad school right now, you may have heard this common colloquial phrase, and if you haven't, you will. A good dissertation is a done dissertation, because you could spend 10 years just editing your dissertation manuscript and still find ways to perfect it. But there's a point where you have to call it and say, this is very well written and in very good shape for what it is meant to accomplish. The same goes for your application, for your essays here, your research statement, your personal statement. There's going to be a point where you say, this is good enough for the purpose of this application. It is very well written. It achieves everything that I'm trying to. It meets all the objectives for the application. I could spend the next year rearranging, restructuring, rewriting, but this is good, and it's good enough for me to move on to the next part of the application. So something to keep in mind, again, balance. A few of my proofreading partners are not scientists or professors. Should I take their advice on how I talk about my research? They don't know anything about quantum physics. Should I really be taking their advice on how I talk about quantum physics? Yes. Very seriously, yes. While non-STEM proofreaders might not understand the details and the science and the methodologies and the importance of various variables and principles and theories that you're working with, they should walk away from reading your 3-page personal statement and your 2-page research statement with a really good idea of what you're trying to accomplish. If they don't walk away with a good, clear idea of what your goal is, what your research project is trying to do, you really want to consider edits and how you can restructure to make that more clear. Some resources for you. Go and visit the annual solicitation, NSF-GRFP.org. There's also a lot of other FAQs and resources on that page for you. The solicitation that is up was for the 2022, so last year's application cycle. The 2023 for the upcoming application cycle is released at the end of June, early July, depending on the year. Then the application will open in August and close in October. So there may be some changes that come in the solicitation in about a month and a half. But for the most part, what you see on the 2022 solicitation will be valid for 2023. So familiarize yourself with it. There's a lot of data in there that will answer questions that you might have about formatting, about eligibility, about the process. You can view previous workshops and various tools and resources on the University of Utah's NSF-GRFP website, which is nsf-grfp.utah.edu. This recording will be posted to that website. Same URL, /workshops is where this video will be. Your faculty mentor is going to be your partner here. If you're an undergrad or you're going into your first year of grad school and you don't necessarily have a faculty mentor yet, for your grad program, you're going to have someone who's a strong influence, someone that you may have worked in their lab as an undergrad, your undergrad faculty advisor who supervised your capstone or was just a really good mentor for you. It does not necessarily have to be your grad school PI. The University of Utah Writing Center and graduate fellowship advising. I'm happy to meet with you one-on-one to talk about your project, your application writing, provide you with feedback on your drafts. And you can reach me at fellowships@gradschool. There should be an L there, and I apologize, gradschool.utah.edu. Next week, we same time, same day, Thursday of next week at 1 p.m., same place here on Zoom. We will be discussing research statements. So I hope to see you back for that. And then our final installment 2 weeks from today on June 8th, 1 p.m. will be broader impacts. So talking about that more sticky wicket of broader impacts in the context of your overall application. So your personal statement and your research statement, and how to frame that uniquely for you. And so, as always, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm Dr. Matthew Plusser with the Graduate School Office of Fellowships and Benefits. Email is oftentimes the best way to reach out to me. Matthew.plusser@utah.edu, or for an appointment or for draft review, fellowships@gradschool.utah.edu. Sometimes responses might take a little while, because if it is something that I truly cannot answer, I do go to the NSF and ask those questions for you. I speak with a program officer or their operations team or whoever is necessary to speak with. When you reach out to me, please feel free to say, here's where I am. I've written my outline. I'm now starting on writing the actual personal statement, or wherever you may be. If you have drafts of any documents, feel free to attach those, etc. And so with that, let's go ahead and stop share. And let's stop